Okay, I can hear you. I hear you. You're saying, Danzy, this is all good and well, but why are you talking about this? I mean, it's interesting and I'm enjoying listening to you, but what does any of this have to do with Harry Potter? Well, my friends, like us, Harry Potter also wants revolutionary change. He wants to live a life of freedom and not have to send his children to racially segregated schools or to ride racially segregated buses and trains. Like Harry Potter, we want revolutionary change.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay, look, let us put this in perspective. The United States government could spend $1 million per student and educate 500 million children in the United States every year. Instead, they choose to spend $500 million on 39 people. So they close schools in our communities. They take our money in taxes. Then they have no money to educate our children and still choose to spend $500 million a year to house 39 people. They can't pay our student loans. They force people into debt simply because they desire higher education. The United States government could give $1 million to 500 million people every year, and we could receive higher education without being indebted to student loan agencies for most of our adult life. Instead, the U.S. government chooses to spend $500 million on 39 people. In the Bay Area where I live, we have a crisis of income inequality and an obscene cost of living. It has created a huge unsheltered population in our community. I'm sure that this is the case in many places in the United States. People who do not have the basic necessities of life, like food, shelter, although they live in the land of opportunity. People who want only what you want, what I want. They just want to be seen as a human being and live a life of dignity. The United States government could spend $1 million and house 500 million unsheltered people living in this country every year. Instead, they choose to spend $500 million to house 39 people. Now, many of these unsheltered people have serious mental health issues. Some are veterans that have been forgotten by their government. Some are women. Some are children. All are human and deserve to live a life of dignity and to live a life that is free from poverty. But in addition to not having the basic necessities of food and shelter, they lack the resources to address the trauma and the mental health that may be at the root or is a direct result of living a life without the basic necessities. Without resources like a support network of family, friends, and community, and access to quality medical care and mental health professionals, these mental health issues will linger and will get worse. People who would otherwise be active members of our society with the proper resources are forced to suffer in silence. Now, the United States government could spend $1 million and provide access to quality mental health services for 500 million people in the United States every year. Instead, they choose to spend $500 million on 39 people. So income inequality is a huge issue in the Bay Area. We have Silicon Valley here, and they have the money and they have the wealth. And so the cost of living is just ballooning out of control. This has, of course, had a negative impact on the older adults who live in our community, who may be retired or live on a fixed income. They deserve to have affordable, healthy food. The United States government could spend $1 million and provide access to quality food for 500 million senior citizens living on a tight budget in the United States. Instead, they choose to spend $500 million on 39 people. I was watching Argo the other day, and I found myself reading a Washington Post article about the victims of the Iranian hostage crisis. And they were held hostage at the U.S. Embassy in Iran in 1979. So in 2015, President Barack Obama promised them $10,000 for each day that they were in captivity, up to $4.4 million per hostage as restitution for their ordeal. Many of those survivors who are still alive have yet to receive their full payment. According to the article, they are being told that there is no more money. Some of these brave American citizens have since passed away, and all have been forgotten by their government. There are currently only 39 survivors still alive from the hostage crisis of 1979. The United States government could give these brave Americans $4 million each right now, today. But instead, our government chooses to spend $500 million to house 39 people detained at Guantanamo Bay for decades. The United States government could choose to invest in our communities. The United States government could choose to invest in our workers and our workforce. The United States government could invest in its own citizens first, but instead, it chooses to continue running its inhumane, cruel, and illegal program at a cost of $500 million a year to house 39 people. So my question that I pose to you is, do we have a blind spot? Can we see the human faces of these people who have all been forgotten by their government in the name of counterterrorism? Or do we only see a vase?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay. Back to Obama. I was looking for faces and I got distracted by a vase. But I'm gonna find those faces. Okay, faces. Yes, okay. At least Obama was in support that Guantanamo Bay needed to be closed. That's a face. I'm gonna give him a face for that. Also a face. Obamacare. Faces. That is for sure. Faces. Millions of people now have access to affordable health care. I'm gonna give him a face for that. See? Faces. I'm looking for the faces, but that does not mean that I am going to ignore the vase. No, the vase is there. but the faces are also there. I'm trying to see both pictures here. I'm trying to see both pictures. If you are watching this video and you made it this far, I mean, remember when it was light outside? I mean, it was light outside when I started. If you made it this far, you are probably like, girl, are you like this all the time? Well, no, not all the time, but look, like I said, the devil made me do this one. It was the devil that made me do this one. But since we're on the topic of the devil, what is the devil anyway? The face of evil, you might say. Okay, well, what is evil though? Is there only cartoonishly evil like Lord Voldemort? Does evil require an action? Can inaction also be evil? Like, let's say, a police officer who fails to intervene when they witness cruel and inhumane treatment of another person, and they are in a position to assist, but they do nothing. Is that evil? Can a person be both good and evil? Can you be both hero and villain? So there is a Yale University open course on the introduction to the Hebrew Bible. One of my favorite videos of all time to watch on YouTube. In one of her lectures, Dr. Hayes says that in the Hebrew Bible, or the Old Testament as you may know it, there is no independent evil principle. The separate evil entity comes later in other religious traditions, especially in Christianity. Ponder. I just want you to ponder. So I was walking down the street in Oakland and I saw this graffiti. And this graffiti led me to think about the KKK. Clearly evil, like the Death Eaters in the Harry Potter series. And I could not help but think that these two groups, the KKK and the Death Eaters in the Harry Potter series, they seem to be very similar, right? Even down to their dress. The KKK believed in a pure race of people. They used violence and terrorism to threaten members of the other race. I couldn't help but wonder if the Death Eaters were a cult. And not all cults are religious now. Cults usually control their members through fear and guilt. And a key identifier of a cult is the way that they treat people that try to leave. In cults, people are shunned or otherwise harmed or threatened when they try to leave. Then I thought, wait a minute. If a cult is identified by the way they shun people that try to leave, then is Dumbledore's army a cult? I mean, do we have a blind spot when it comes to Dumbledore's army? So as I said, I was raised a Jehovah's Witness. My grandmother was Catholic and she converted somehow, I don't know how that happened, to become a Jehovah's Witness. These two religions, they're not similar in any way. How one goes from Catholicism to Jehovah's Witness, from yes, I believe in a Holy Trinity, to no, there is definitely not a Holy Trinity, I don't know. But those two extremes existed in one woman. So make of that what you will. So my father was raised a Jehovah's Witness. When I was younger, my father and my birth mother, before she passed, they were divorced. And when the divorce happened, my father was disassociated from the church. The Jehovah's Witnesses were not allowed to speak to him. They shunned him. They abandoned him at a time when he was most in need of community. All because he had gotten a divorce, and this is frowned upon by the people of this religion, at least at that time. He was dismembered, essentially, because to them, divorce was something wrong. And so they passed judgment on him. You did something wrong, so you are not worthy to be in our presence, in our community, in our society. And so he was shunned, disassociated from that religion. I saw the toll that the shunning and the shaming that my father endured, how that took a toll on his mental health. And I watched his personality change. He was traumatized from that experience, and it caused him to be angry and to lash out at other people. This is why currently I am not a Jehovah's Witness, because any religion that uses psychological trauma as a means of control and punishment is not a religion I can get behind. That's just me. It's just my own personal opinion. But my question for us is this, my people, do we have a blind spot? We currently use shunning and shaming as a means of punishment in our society, do we not? We call it cancel culture, the cult of cancel culture. If we call it cultish behavior when a religious group shuns a person and kicks them out of a group for an action that they did that the group deems unacceptable, then is it cultish behavior when we as a society do it? Do we only see the vase, the thing that the person did or said or failed to say that we have judged as bad or evil or unacceptable? Can we see the faces? Can we see that we are inflicting irreparable psychological and mental harm on a person based on our judgments of another human being? Who are we to judge? Who are we to judge? And remember, I told you earlier, severe mental harm is sufficient to rise to the level of torture. So are we torturing people in the name of protecting our society from being corrupted by the evil sinners? Now, this was a long time ago, and I don't know what the situation is like today for Jehovah's Witnesses, so I cannot speak on that. I can only speak from my own experience. This is why currently I stay away from all religions. I just stay away from them. I will take Black baby Jesus, but I don't want the bathwater. I'm throwing out the bathwater. I'm keeping the baby, Black baby Jesus. So remember that character in Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix, Marietta Edgecombe? Remember? She was in the DA, but then she left the DA because the DA is Dumbledore's army. I assume you knew that, but the DA. Her parents worked for the Ministry of Magic, and Marietta told Professor Umbridge about the DA meetings because it was technically against the school rules to have secret society meetings. And she was shunned by other Dumbledore's army members. And not only that, she wasn't just shunned, she was cursed with boils on her face to spell out the word sneak. And her memory was erased. I'm sorry. And remember her friend, Cho, was also shunned from the group? I don't know. That sounds like cultish behavior to me. I don't know. I'm just throwing that out there. That must have made other DA members think twice about trying to leave that group, right? I don't know. I think about these things, people. I ponder. So admittedly, the DA believed that the government's actions at that time were not in the best interest of the students. And that was why the organization was formed anyway, so that Harry could teach the students how to protect themselves. But it was still technically illegal, right? Does that make it okay then, since they had good intentions? All of this led me to think about obedience to authority. Poor Marietta was just trying to follow the rules. She was trying to obey her parents, obey her teachers. She was legitimately afraid that her parents would lose their job, and she was shunned from the group. If Marietta had wanted to rally against the government legally, what could she have done? Now, as we know, Professor Umbridge worked for the Ministry of Magic. She was a government employee. What if she was against all of the restrictions too? But she was just doing her job. She was just following orders as a Ministry of Magic bureaucrat. Let's be honest, Professor Umbridge, her job, It required her to do some horrific things to students. Remember that time Harry had to write the phrase, I will not tell lies or something like that? We call that writing lines. But anyway, he had to write lines and he used a quill that used his own blood and branded the phrase in his hand, leaving him permanently scarred. I'm sorry, that is torture. That is torture. There is no way around it. Professor Umbridge tortured a child in the name of discipline. I'm not gonna go there. I'm not gonna go there. I could. I'm not going to. I'm gonna stay on topic. But what if Umbridge wanted to refuse? She didn't want to do it, but she was afraid to refuse. She was just following orders. Is Umbridge to blame or the Ministry of Magic? Are government bureaucrats ever responsible for following clearly cruel and inhumane orders? Or are they exempt if the order was deemed legal by the government for which they work? For example, if Russia gives its military officers a command to murder civilians in the Ukraine, are the military soldiers also responsible? Or does the buck begin and end with Putin? Can a government ever commit genocide without the assistance of its government bureaucrats? Obviously not, since Hitler was not going to operate all of the gas chambers himself. So how do people refuse? What resources are there for people who work for governments, who want to challenge the rules that they are tasked with enacting because they believe them to be illegal, cruel, and against the public interest, but they just don't know how? What resources have we put in place to help these government employees so that they are not being complicit in genocide and torture and persecution? You might say, well, Danzy, they need to get a new job. Okay, I hear you. But to that I would say, would that prevent any other Harry Potters from being tortured or from being scarred? Or would the Ministry of Magic just hire another Professor Umbridge to do the work? When forced to choose between following orders and doing the right thing, why do most people choose to obey authority? Well, I can tell you why I did it. I worked for the government in the United States for 4 administrations. G-Dubs, Obama, Trump, Biden. 4 administrations. All of them were different. Everyone had their own agenda that they would use the public servants as political pawns in order to enact that agenda. But it was during the Trump and Biden administrations when I was told to be complicit in what I considered to be torture by sending refugees and asylum seekers, including children, to await for their asylum hearing in Mexico under conditions that I mentioned earlier, causing them irreparable physical and mental harm, which we now know is serious enough to amount to torture. We did this to children. So you cannot convince me that there is no mental harm associated with this. Am I Professor Umbridge? Oh my God. Oh my God. In 2020, I did it because I did not know I had a choice. I didn't believe that government bureaucrats had any power, especially against the United States government. But now, in 2022, when the Biden administration restarted the Remain in Mexico program under a court order to make a good faith effort to restart the program, why didn't he refuse? Why didn't Biden refuse? Why didn't anyone in his cabinet refuse? Why did he expand the program to include more people of color? Why was it on the shoulders of the public servants to decide whether to comply and be complicit or disobey authority. But by 2022, I had come pretty close to finishing this story, and I knew by that point that I do have power and I do have magic, and that no matter how powerful a government may believe itself to be, they are powerless in the face of free will and choice. Yes, think about Adam and Eve in the garden. We all know this story. Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden. The Lord God gave them a choice: eat from the fruit of the tree of knowledge of good and evil, or die. That is a choice. Eat of the fruit or die. And they chose death. And the Lord God was like, oh, I wasn't expecting that. Okay. They chose to disobey authority. They chose their own destiny rather than to go with the status quo. The Lord God, all-powerful, all-knowing, could do nothing. They chose death. And all the Lord God could do was watch. Now, here's a question for you. Do you think that this was the plan all along? That a man shall leave his father and his mother and shall cleave to his wife, and they shall become one flesh. Who is Adam's father? Who is Adam's mother? Why is it in the leaving that they become one flesh? Maybe separation was the plan all along so that union would be a choice. To me, the story of Adam and Eve was all about choice. Surrender your legions, stay naked in the garden, or die to the old and create a new world. Let the boy who lived die so that just Harry can live. Okay. I can hear you. I hear you saying, Danzy. This is all very interesting and good, but please tell me how any of this, war crimes, human rights abuses, Guantanamo Bay, the devil, obedience to authority, Adam and Eve, choice and gardens, how is any of this relevant to Harry Potter? Oh, friend, this is why you need to read the story. The link is in the description box. The story will make sense now. You will get it all when you read the story. It will be crystal clear, I promise. Cross my heart. Now, another one of my intentions, Miss Oprah, she would be so proud of me. Look at me. I said so many intentions, Miss Oprah. I said many intentions. I was listening. So another intention that I had as I wrote this story was that I wanted to empower other public servants who worked for governments in any country, whether in the United States or some other country, that we do have power. And that power is called choice. So when a president or a prime minister or whatever you have in your country says to you, I need you to go press the button on the gas chamber. I want you, public servant, go kill those civilians. I want you, public servant, to cause irreparable harm to another human being. I want public servants to know that they have a choice. That does not mean that choice does not come with consequences now. As I said earlier, there are many factors that one has to consider when they choose resistance in the face of injustice. But without sacrifice, there can be no reward. My hope is that with these issues in mind, the reader will get a deeper understanding of this story that I've written. My intention is that this story will challenge our core beliefs around race, magic, discrimination, torture, human rights abuses, refugees, religion, good, evil, heroes, villains, and even challenge what we believe about literature. My wish, I hope that this story will empower those who have traditionally been taught that only certain people have magic, that only certain people have the power to change their world. Now, I have spent almost 14 years in public service, so I wanted to connect this video to public service. I wanted to set up a fundraiser to raise money for Kids in Need of Defense. Kids in Need of Defense is a non-governmental organization, or an NGO, that was founded in 2008 by Microsoft and Angelina Jolie, which I had no idea about. I learned about Kids in Need of Defense through my work in asylum, and I was most interested in them because of their work providing legal defense to children in immigration court, and they helped them to navigate the complex world of asylum law. So I wanted to connect the donate button for Kids in Need of Defense to this video. But then I learned that YouTube requires you to have 10,000 subscribers before you can add a fundraiser to your video. I'm sorry, what you talking about, Willis? What you talking about, Willis? Why would a person's subscriber count matter when one is trying to raise money for a charitable organization? Is fundraising something only the popular kids can do? Who pulled that number, 10,000 subscribers, out of their butthole and said, yeah, 10,000, that's a good round number. We're gonna go with 10,000 subscribers. Who decided, oh yes, once you have 10,000 subscribers, then you are worthy enough to have a donate button attached to your video? So if I had only one subscriber and only one view on my video, but that one subscriber and that one viewer wanted to donate $20 to whatever organization I had attached to that video, are we saying that $20 to a charitable organization, that's just not enough for anybody to get out of bed in the morning? Really? Because I don't know any charitable organization that's going to turn down any money. I don't know any charitable organization that's going to say, I will accept money from you when you have 10,000 subscribers. Please help me understand why a person's subscriber count, one, is so important to people. The subscriber count does not change the content of the video. The content should speak for itself, regardless of any outside validation. But two, why does the subscriber count matter when one is trying to raise money for a charitable organization? What does popularity have to do with charitable giving? I'm just, oh God. Okay. But of course, I started to think, do we have a blind spot for people that we consider to be unpopular? Do we only see a vase, or can we see the faces? Remember our Luna Lovegood? In school, Luna Lovegood was considered to be unpopular. And that's simply because she had a unique way of seeing the world, a unique way of dressing. But I am certain that what was considered quirky and unpopular then is probably considered high fashion couture now. So, since I could not add a donate button from YouTube,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
okay, so I don't think that I can end a video about blind spotting and scapegoating and Harry Potter without talking about the Black Panther Party, a group that was also founded in Oakland, California. I mean, man, definitely must be something in the water. Something in the water. Okay. So the government branded the Black Panther Party as terrorists, although they were interested simply in equal treatment under the laws. They were interested in social initiatives to uplift the community, some of which are still in existence today. They were blind spotted, they were scapegoated, and they were assassinated by the government. So one of those members was Fred Hampton. He was assassinated by the government simply because he was just too good at public speaking. He had the ability to unite both Black and white people against poverty and racial inequality. And that made the government nervous because the government knows the power of unity to bring about change, and they were not trying to have that. So they assassinated him. Now, were some Black Panthers in favor of armed resistance and confrontation with the police? Yes, this is true, but vase and faces, people, vase and faces. So why am I telling you all of this? Why, Danzy, why do you insist on telling me all of this? It sounds good and everything, but why do I need to know? Because you are going to read the story and then you're going to say, I remember in that video, she said something about, everything that I'm talking about in this video, I am talking about it because I hope that you get a deeper understanding of the story. I don't want you to read the story for completion, to check off another book that you've read. I want you to read the story for understanding. I want you to read it and to stop and to ponder. That is our word of today, ponder. I just want to ponder.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Day turned to night and night to day. I know it's a lot we need to talk about, but I am just going to keep going with it. So we were talking about the epilogue of the previous Harry Potter series, and I wonder, what is Ginny Weasley up to? I think, personally, Ginny would be a baker, because when I was writing the story, I was obsessed with the Great British Baking Show, and I said, you know what? Somebody's got to be a baker. Luckily for me, Ginny raised her hand and said, I'll be a baker. But she can't just cater to the wizarding world now. So how will she use her magical talents of baking to unite the wizard and the muggle worlds? Also, what is Rita Skeeter up to? I personally cannot see anyone as Rita Skeeter but Emma Thompson. I cannot. Who else could be Rita Skeeter? Only Emma Thompson. I'm just saying. So as a journalist, would Rita Skeeter have a difficult time determining the line between journalism and voyeurism? I don't know. And George Weasley, how would he fare in an integrated world? I personally think that given George's business acumen, that he would have a cryptocurrency business. This is my thesis. He will have a cryptocurrency business. No more magic money. Yes. This is my hypothesis. Read the story. But the thing is, what are they going to do with all of those galleons? People look at you crazy, at least in the United States, if you accidentally give them a Canadian coin. Okay, can you imagine if you drop them a galleon? Like, here you go. Like, no, we don't accept that. Get that out of here. And where would they live, though? If they don't have any muggle money, how would they live in a muggle world? Would they have to live in that tent that Hermione carried around in the Deathly Hallows in Book 7? I don't know. But as I mentioned, in Oakland, we have a very large unsheltered population, and many of them live in tents around Lake Merritt or under bridges, what we call here tent cities. And what about Hermione? Remember when Hermione stormed out of Professor Trelawney's? Yes, you could tell that Hermione had a blind spot when it came to divination, right? Divination, crystal balls, reading tea leaves, all of it. But what is divination really? Well, Webster's Dictionary describes divination as the art or practice that seeks to foresee or foretell future events or discover hidden knowledge, usually by the interpretation of omens or by the aid of supernatural powers. Now, It seems to me that there are already many examples of us using divination in everyday life, like, I don't know, weather forecasting, for example. How is the reading the movement of the clouds and the weather systems to determine if you need to carry your umbrella tomorrow or the next day or next week on your vacation? How is that different from reading the stars and the movement of the planets to determine if you need to be prepared for some strong wind? It seems to me that weather forecasting, what is going to happen in the future, is a form of divination. It's just a form of divination that is widely accepted in society. And we are not going to get into all of the plethora of examples of divination in the Bible. But when people in the Bible do it, they are called prophets, unless those people are women and they're called witches. But like Hermione, do we have a blind spot when it comes to divination? We have scapegoated magic as evil sorcery and devil worship unless it is used by divinity. But the question is, why the arbitrary distinction? One of the most ancient forms of divination is known as tarot, specifically the Marseille tarot. The oldest Marseille tarot cards go back to at least the 15th century. They are the distant relative to the modern-day playing cards. They began as a game, but later they took on new meaning as their hidden symbols and archetypes began to emerge. Nowadays, at least in Oakland, you can find them anywhere and everywhere. They are rising in popularity, and you can find all types of cards to suit every interest, from baseball-themed tarot to cooking-themed tarot. Just walking down the street, I literally found a deck of tarot cards just right there on the sidewalk. I just took it as life saying, "These are for you, darling. Take them." And so I did. There must be a reason, right, why they have remained in existence for so long, no matter how many times they are scapegoated. Given the many forms of divination in existence, surely divination alone would be insufficient to allow tarot to continue its rise. Do we only see a vase? What are we not seeing? Let's look at an example. Let's look at the unnamed arcana in the Tarot de Marseille, often referred to as death. Instinctively, I may say that I see a figure that has just cut off these heads and hands. But if I study the image a little longer, I would say, wait, isn't it also possible that these figures are buried under the sand, and this death-like figure, having escaped from being buried itself, though it may look threatening, is actually coming to liberate those who have also been buried? The image could be a vase, or it could be two faces. Really, we need to see both in order to understand the archetype. The archetype of death is both vase and faces. It is destructive, sure, but nothing can be created without first destroying something. Remember Adam and Eve in the garden? They had a choice, to be or not to be. Eat the fruit from the tree of knowledge of good and evil, or death. They chose death, and only in that choice did they become the parents of a nation. They destroyed the status quo, and they created something new. For me, meditating on the images in the tarot is a daily reminder to see both pictures. That which I instinctively see in the image, and that other thing that is also there, but it takes an effort to see. It's like daily blind spotting push-ups. To use the tarot to connect and converse with one's higher self or one's psyche, and to find one's own blind spots, to explore the depths of one's own soul, one's own psyche, exploring the darkness and the light within yourself, is a common use for tarot today, and it has very little to do with divination. Perhaps this fear of confrontation with oneself is what caused Hermione to run away from Professor Trelawney's class, to dismiss her class as nothing. But to know thyself is to know magic, because then we are less likely to act out of our unconscious bias, and we can instead act based on our conscious choice. All right, but I can hear you. I hear you all the way in Oakland. Danzy, you have completely lost me. What does death and tarot have to do with Harry Potter? Friends, you already know what I'm going to say. You have to read the story. But let me give you an example. In alchemy, death is a necessary transition for the creation of the Philosopher's Stone. The old lead material will have to die so that it can now be transformed into a new, more purified substance. In Harry Potter, Book 7, The Deathly Hallows, we saw the boy who lived die so that he could save the wizarding world, remember, from Voldemort. But when he was reborn, he was not transformed at all. He did not change. His life did not change. No one around him changed. I mean, the war ended, yes, but the world around him did not change. It still remained segregated. So it seems to me that the cycle has to be repeated and another death has to occur until the Philosopher's Stone emerges.
To be clear, when we are talking about death in Harry Potter, we are talking about change. We are talking about a transformation. We are talking about the boy who lived and societal expectations being released so that Harry Potter can become what he chooses to be.
That is why I say the boy who lived, or the conscious personality of Harry Potter, must die so that he can surrender to his companion star, the authentic self, the just Harry. Just Harry wants to live. He just wants to be just Harry. No more the boy who lived. Holy vulva, Batman. But look, at some point, Harry Potter will have to confront his own shadow. All the parts of himself that he has ignored or he has repressed. And at some point, Batman will have to do the same thing. The Batman, in his current form, must die and surrender to his companion star, or the just Bruce. But I think about this, if Batman were to die, and we're not talking about a literal death, right? We're talking about a transformation from the old person that he used to be to his authentic self. If the Batman were to die, what do you think his authentic self would look like? I mean, I personally, thinking about Denzel, I personally think if he, the Batman, is so interested in protection, then he should just be a police officer, right? And he can protect people legally. Why is he stuck in the negative expression of this orphan archetype? Why do you think he hasn't done it already? I don't know. I think probably because he knows that he would be one of those corrupt police officers that he hates so much. And that would bring him into direct confrontation with himself, which he has been trying to avoid all of his life. Will he choose to surrender the boy who lives personality that he has become so attached to? And will he yield to his higher self, his authentic self, his just Harry self? What would he become, do you think? Would he be the ruthless rebel like Batman? Or would he be a graceful warrior? How would Harry Potter use his magic to make a change in his world? So I personally have always seen Harry Potter as a teacher. Ever since the Order of the Phoenix, Book 5, when he was in charge of teaching students defense against the dark arts in Dumbledore's army, I always thought that Harry Potter would be a teacher. I said, I see you, Harry Potter, I see you. And to me, what is more magical than seeing in another person something that they cannot yet see in themselves? How is teaching not magic? Convince me that teaching is not magic. And of course, Jesus was a teacher. So it makes sense that Harry Potter, I'm just saying, the savior of the wizarding world, it makes sense that Harry Potter should be a teacher too. I know, but I can hear you. I can hear you. Danzy, are you trying to teach me? Because I'm not interested in learning. I'm here only because I want to hear about Harry Potter. People, read the story. You're going to have to read the story. If you read the opening sentence, a light bulb will click. Actually, let's read the opening sentence. It says, "The boy who lived is dead." There it is. Ding. Okay, but we cannot talk about death and its creative or destructive powers without talking about nuclear weapons. Yes, I said it. Let's talk about nuclear weapons. In our current times, we live constantly with the very real threat of nuclear war due to Russia's illegal war in the Ukraine. According to the website of the International Campaign to Abolish Nuclear Weapons, or ICAN, there are currently over 13,000 nuclear warheads in the world, with Russia and the United States holding the majority of the weapons. It has always baffled me that in the country who has the only recorded use of nuclear weapons in the world, the United States is always trying to prevent other countries from obtaining nuclear weapons. I mean, if anyone should not have nuclear weapons, it is the country who has demonstrated that they do not have a problem using nuclear weapons against civilians. We cannot talk about war crimes in Russia and the killing of innocent civilians and not also examine the killing of innocent civilians by the United States government officials for which no one has ever been held accountable. I am, of course, on this occasion, speaking of the bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki in Japan during World War II. Like I said, my birthday is December 7th, so I find myself fascinated with all things World War II, specifically the use of genocide and persecution as tools in the name of protection. So as you may already be aware, on August 6, 1945, the United States dropped an atomic bomb on Hiroshima, killing almost 70,000 people, civilians, instantly. President Truman told the American people that these bombings were necessary in order to end the war. The killing of innocent civilians, many of whom were children, was necessary in order to protect American citizens' lives. Not only did the United States drop one nuclear warhead, it dropped two. The second one occurring on August 9, 1945, in which another 40,000 civilians were killed. Now, why someone would use their gifts and talents to create nuclear weapons rather than trying to cure cancer or, I don't know, ending world hunger, I don't know why. But sure, nuclear power promises more jobs in the community and is a source of energy to power our homes and our communities. But do we have a blind spot when it comes to nuclear energy? Do we only see the vase, or can we also see the faces? Can we see the thousands of people that have perished instantly with no trace of their existence, and the thousands more that suffer from the lasting impacts of radiation on their health and on their bodies? The pregnant women who have miscarriages, or the children who develop intellectual disabilities, or whose growth is impacted by the long-term impacts of radiation exposure, and all of the people who develop and live with cancer as a result of the radiation. Can we see their faces? What about the invisible scars that result from the use of nuclear weapons? That is the psychological trauma that people have to live with every day. What about the impact on the animal and the plant life? The impact on the sea and on the air? Are we still blind spotting Mother Nature, or can we see her face now? By now, surely I've convinced you that you can see Mother Nature's face. In 2017, the United Nations adopted a treaty on the prohibition of nuclear weapons, seeking international cooperation to ban all nuclear weapons. Can you guess, though? There were several countries, I believe, that did not sign the treaty. Can you name one country? Just one. Name a country that did not sign the treaty to ban nuclear weapons. Well, if you said the United States, you would be right. The United States has said that it does not support banning nuclear weapons, so it will not sign the treaty. I'm sorry, but what reason would a government have to not want to ban nuclear weapons? Is it to hold on to them just in case someone threatens you with a nuclear weapon and you can threaten them back with a nuclear weapon? If you annihilate the world with your nuclear weapons, well, I'll annihilate the world with mine too. I really cannot understand what reason someone would have for saying, nope, I'm going to keep my nuclear weapons, thank you. The only reason we would continue to hold on to our nuclear weapons is because we do not see the faces of the people that have been impacted by nuclear war. I encourage you to look at the photographs from the bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. They are too graphic, I think, to show them here, which is why I'm not going to show them. But you can look at them online. Look at the faces of the people, of the children who were just walking down the street one day when they disintegrated into a pile of ash instantly. Imagine, though, living with the knowledge that the United States pushes for investigation of war crimes into other countries who kill civilians. But yet, they have yet to hold anyone accountable when they kill innocent civilians. Where do we think that the other countries learned that they could kill innocent civilians openly and with impunity as long as they say, well, military necessity? They must have learned it from somewhere, right? Who do you think they learned it from? Okay, but now for sure, if you weren't saying it before, you're saying it now. Danzy, you have lost your mind. Why are you talking about nuclear weapons? How is this relevant to Harry Potter? You better tell me the relationship between nuclear weapons and Harry Potter. Well, my friends, read the story. I started to think about the wizarding world becoming integrated and governments now being aware of the existence of magic. Not that they haven't been, but what would they do with this knowledge? Say, for example, the United States all of a sudden becomes aware that there is magic out there. Do you think the United States government would seek to use magic to cure cancer or to eliminate world hunger? No. They would for sure try to create weapons. They would for sure say, sign me up for some magical nuclear weapons, please. This is my hypothesis.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
If the government believes that all wizards are terrorists, and in the interest of eliminating terrorism, it decides to eliminate wizards, is this protection in the name of national security, or is this genocide? Can the government then use nuclear weapons to achieve its purpose of ending terrorism by using said weapons against wizards? And if the wizards had to flee because of this persecution, what would they take with them, do you think? Their wands, their books, their furniture, their important papers? If you had to make a decision to leave your home right now, let's say you live in a place where fires make this a very real possibility, like in California, and you don't have time to call the magic moving. That is the real name of a real moving company in the Bay Area, Magic Moving. By the way, I could not help myself. But what would you think is important for you to take with you? What if you can't bring a giant trunk? What would you carry? And what would you leave behind? While we are on the topic of death still, let's talk about Adam and Eve again. One of my favorite stories, second to Harry Potter maybe, to just dissect. Let's talk about it. But more specifically, let's talk about the serpent. I don't think anyone can deny that the serpent has been scapegoated since forever. I was walking down the street and passed by this Christian bookstore, and they had this book in the window. If that is not scapegoating the serpent, I don't know what is. But here's the question. Is the basilisk or the serpent the hero or the villain, do you think? If Voldemort deputized the basilisk to do the dirty work for him and go and convince Harry Potter to die, and the serpent is just acting on Voldemort's direction, is the serpent evil? Does the basilisk have free will and choice to say to Voldemort, no, I'm not doing that? Who do you think sent the serpent to Adam and Eve? Remember when the Lord God is handing out punishments in the story and the divine authority says to Adam, Adam, did you eat from the fruit of the tree of knowledge of good and evil? And Adam says, the woman that you gave me. And then the Lord God turns to Eve and says, Eve, what is Adam talking about? Have you been eating the fruit from the tree of knowledge of good and evil? And Eve says, but the serpent said. But for some reason, the Lord God does not turn to the serpent and say, serpent, what's your side of the story? Tell me. Adam says this, Eve says this, you tell me what's happening here. Nope, didn't happen. And to me, this is a very important detail that we tend to just gloss over when we interpret this story. But when I read this story, I can't help but wonder, when it comes to the serpent, do we have a blind spot? It seems to me that the Lord God did not ask the serpent its side of the story because he did not want the serpent to give away the plot. Because the serpent would have said, wait a minute, Lord. You told me to go tell the woman to remind her of her destiny. You told me to tell her why she is here. What if the serpent only told the truth, but that truth had been misunderstood? For example, if you eat from the fruit of the tree of knowledge of good and evil, you will not die, but you will become like God, knowing good from evil. How is that a lie? To tell Adam and Eve that eating the fruit from the tree of knowledge of good and evil will make you know good and evil. I mean, it's in the name, people. It's in the name. The tree of knowledge of good and evil is right there in the name. This, to me, is one of the clearest examples of scapegoating. We are forcing the serpent to carry the blame for Adam and Eve's choice. Here's what I think about, though, when I think about this story. What language is the serpent speaking to Eve such that she can understand, but it seems that Adam cannot? Remember, in the accurate translation of the story, and you have to have an accurate translation of this story, I have the Jewish Publication Society, which is an accurate translation of the story. According to Dr. Christine Hayes, Adam is there with Eve while the serpent is speaking. Eve gets the instructions all wrong, but yet Adam never interjects. He never says, that's not what the Lord God said. Nope. Eve is not the only person in the world to do this, though. Let's think about it. Have you ever done this? When you are having a conversation with someone and your significant other is there, but you don't know if your significant other is listening. So what do you do to see if they're listening? You say something completely wrong, something that you know this person did not say, and you wait and see if they're going to interject, right? If they interject, then that means you were paying attention. Okay, I just wanted to make sure you were listening. If they don't interject, then you give them the side eye and you say, are you listening to me? Or something like that, So then when the Lord God comes and says, Adam, have you been eating from the fruit of the tree of knowledge of good and evil? Adam doesn't say, that sneaky serpent was just talking all kinds of ish behind your back, Lord, that serpent. No. Why doesn't Adam just say, well, Lord, the serpent was just telling us all of these things? Why do you think Adam just says the woman and never says the serpent? Why do you think Adam didn't mention anything that the serpent said? Could it be that Adam didn't even understand the conversation that they were having? He was there with Eve, but he had no idea what was happening because he did not understand the language. What was the language, do you think? If you say, Danzy, I don't know, why don't you just tell me? You clearly have not been paying attention. Because I'm going to tell you, read the story, people. Read the story. Okay, I'll give you a hint. It has to do with alchemy. And if you say, well, Danzy, wait a minute, why are you talking about Adam and Eve in a story about Harry Potter? Well, I would say because the story of Adam and Eve, one interpretation is one of alchemy. And I would say because both stories are about revolutionary choice. They are about choosing wisdom and choosing death over continuing with this status quo that is no longer serving them. And since we're talking about Adam and Eve in the garden, let's talk about nakedness, right? They were naked in the garden. We talked about the Black Madonna statue and the Statue of Liberty. I started to think about if I were to remix the Black Madonna and the Statue of Liberty statue, what would it look like? True story though, when I was looking for a Black Madonna statue, not this one, but I have another one over here. I was looking in a witchy shop or magic store for a book on magic. I wasn't looking for a Black Madonna in that store, but there she was, sitting there on the shelf. I found the Black Madonna in the magic store on the shelf with the other goddesses, right there where she belonged. And I would have never thought to go to the magic shop to find a statue of the Black Madonna. I for sure had a blind spot. I only saw the religious side of the Black Madonna. I didn't see the goddess part. I could see the vase, but I could not see the faces. I think, though, that we have a blind spot with Mary because we only see the Virgin, and we have scapegoated the prostitute or the Mary Magdalene. And as a result, this virgin prostitute binary is projected onto women, causing a split, I think, within ourselves. But now that I'm thinking about it, though, I go back to the incident with the police arresting the woman that I mentioned earlier. Remember, and her top fell down and she had a bare chest. And I immediately thought of it as something negative, right? I mean, in that situation, it was still for sure completely inappropriate and insensitive and unkind that they would not allow her to cover herself. But now the question that I have is, do we have a blind spot when it comes to nakedness? The shame that we have attached to the body, specifically the female body, from breastfeeding to menstruation, you name it, we have blind spotted and scapegoated the female body since forever. And nakedness can be many things, right? It could be lack of knowledge about something, to be naked in the garden, for example. It could be vulnerability, to be naked, to be raw, to be authentic. But do we only see the vase? Or can we see the faces too? Can we see that but for the female body, the human race would cease to exist. Like, why is that something to be ashamed of? When I worked for the government, I had to have a very thorough background investigation, which I would say is similar to the confirmation hearings for the Supreme Court justices. I mean, obviously, it's not the same, but a confirmation hearing for a Supreme Court justice is part of their background investigation, I would argue. It's part of their vetting for the job. And if I had lied during my background investigation, I would have been fired. And I probably would have been prosecuted, more than likely, right? Why are the rules different for the Supreme Court justices? The conservative ones who said during their background investigation that Roe versus Wade was precedent and that they would not go against precedent. Why are the rules different? But that is the America that we live in, where judges or people in authority can break the law with impunity, but where innocent people, where poor people, where Black people are scapegoated into mass incarceration. Remember when being a Supreme Court justice was a prestigious job? Now it's like having a Nobel Prize. I mean, you think to yourself, well, Aung San Suu Kyi has a Nobel Prize and, she was complicit in genocide. So I don't really know. Is it a good thing to have a Nobel Prize? I mean, and before you say anything, Aung San Suu Kyi, was she complicit in genocide while her government was murdering Rohingya in Burma and she did nothing? The question is inaction complicit? Qui tacit consentire videtur? Is silence consent? Holy vulva, Batman. Okay, I can hear you. I hear you. You're saying, Danzy, this is all good and well, but why are you talking about this? I mean, it's interesting and I'm enjoying listening to you, but what does any of this have to do with Harry Potter? Well, my friends, like us, Harry Potter also wants revolutionary change. He wants to live a life of freedom and not have to send his children to racially segregated schools or to ride racially segregated buses and trains. Like Harry Potter, we want revolutionary change.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay, so why is any of this important? Well, as we discussed earlier, we have a story that is based on the idea of racial segregation and exclusion. That certain groups of people, if you have a drop of magical blood, you are allowed into the magical world, the wizarding world, and you have access to opportunities like attending the magical school. Where other races of people who do not have this ancestry, who do not have this drop of magic in their blood, they are excluded from the world. They are treated as inferior, the inferior race, and they are not given access into this world, to include access to this school. This, to me, is the doctrine of separate but equal. This is Jim Crow wrapped in the cloak of fantasy. And then they take this school that is segregated on the basis of race, and they build a monument to it in the United States. One at the theme park in Florida, one at the theme park in California. And they did not think about what impact this monument to the doctrine of separate but equal would have on the people who live in the United States, who have this idea deeply rooted in their history. So we cannot talk about the wizarding world without talking about Jim Crow America, and we cannot talk about Jim Crow America without talking about the doctrine of separate but equal, which comes to us from the Supreme Court case Plessy versus Ferguson. Now, Homer Plessy was, to the naked eye, a white man in appearance. He had white skin. According to the law, though, because he had one drop of black blood, that is because one of his ancestors somewhere in his lineage was a black person, then he was, by law, considered to be a black man, regardless of the color of his skin, and he was required to sit in the, quote, colored section of the train. Homer Plessy was, of course, a revolutionary. Although he could pass as a white man, he told the conductor on the train that he was in fact black because of his ancestry. And the conductor told him to move to the colored section of the train. Homer Plessy refused to move from his seat on the train, and he was then arrested. When the Supreme Court heard the constitutional challenge to his case and to the legality of separate but equal train cars, the Supreme Court essentially said, well, separate but equal, what's the problem? We don't see a problem with this. Why should white people have to share their train car with black people? So as long as there is a separate place for black people and that place is equal to what the white people have, we don't have a problem with this. Thus, the doctrine of separate but equal became the law of the land in 1896. Now, as I mentioned earlier, in 1954, in the Supreme Court decision of Brown versus the Board of Education, the court ruled and public opinion dictated that we would no longer accept separate but equal as the law of the land. The court said that where an opportunity for education is provided by the government in its public schools, then such an opportunity is a right which must be made available to all on equal terms. But here we have a school in the form of Hogwarts that is segregated based on who has what amount of magical blood. And if you don't have magical blood, then you aren't allowed at the school. And then they built this school in the United States. It is a living monument to the doctrine of separate but equal. This, to me, is completely unacceptable in 2022. But let's be clear, I am not advocating for tearing down this school. I am not advocating for blowing up the theme park. That would not benefit anyone. But I am advocating for change. This school needs to be integrated with all haste. Muggle children must be allowed an equal opportunity to magical education, the same that their wizard counterparts are entitled to. This is the only way to save this from being a monument to separate but equal and to transform it into one in which all people are created equal. In the United States, it is often quoted that our Constitution neither knows nor tolerates classes among citizens. Oh, how I wish this were true. I wish it were true. But as I said, I had a blind spot to Harry Potter too. We all did. So I am not shaming or shunning anyone. But now we see. Now we have transformed eyes. So what are we going to do about it?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Hello, world. Editing Danzy here. So, I just wanted to make something really clear. I am not arguing that this series is racist, nor am I arguing that the creator is racist.
in my opinion, the series desensitizes us to racism and racist ideologies. It makes racial segregation look cool and inviting. It labels the proponents of racial segregations as the victims who have no choice but to be afraid of this other dangerous race that has done nothing to them in this world. In our current times, racism is still very much a part of our country in the United States. We are already on track and slowly sliding backwards in time. And I have no doubt that at some point the Supreme Court is going to look to Brown versus the Board of Education in the same way that it did Roe versus Wade. And it's going to say, why do we need that? Let the states decide if they want racially segregated schools or not. On that day, we are going to wish that we had not become desensitized to these issues, that we had said something and done something before we get to the point where it becomes law again. And let's make no mistake, people, we are headed back to a Jim Crow era, okay? Using entertainment, fiction, other stories as a means of propaganda to say, see how dangerous these people are, see how ignorant these people are, see why they need us to control them, see why they need us to keep them in their places. This is what was used in the Jim Crow era to justify racist policies against Black people, to justify racial segregation in schools. This is why I think it is necessary for us to address the issue in this story, because this story is so ingrained in our culture. These stories are everywhere. These characters are everywhere. Therefore, they are not immune to cultural shifts that happen based on race, because as our society evolves and our consciousness becomes more aware, then our society changes and the culture changes. That means that because this character is so ingrained in our culture, it also must change or it will become obsolete. It will change voluntarily or it will change by force, by the people saying, we don't want it anymore, because it is not representative of the world that we want to live in.
But as I said, it is the role of the artist to make the revolution irresistible. This is, of course, let's be clear, referring to a peaceful revolution. We're talking about flight. We're talking about flight as protest, flight as using our magic, our voices collectively to make a change, flight as voting. You know that's why they want to take away voting from us, right? Because they know that voting is the wind. And people fear the wind. They fear change, but voting is change. And it is time, I think, for revolutionary change. Though, but what they're not counting on is the power of the Black woman. Right, Black Mary? Everybody sleeps on the power of the Black woman. Like the Black Madonna, we are the wind. We are the change. When you let a Black woman into your house, we're coming to make change, okay? We see something is not working and we're like, let me fix that because that's not working right there. Why are you doing it like that? You know there's a better way. Let's change this situation. Let's change the situation. Let's look at Rosa Parks, for example. Rosa Parks made a revolutionary choice. She refused to give up her seat to a white person on a bus that was segregated on the basis of race. And you know what that white man said to her when she did not give up her seat on the bus. Do you know what he said? He said, are you going to stand up or am I going to have to call the police? I mean, does it sound familiar at all? Remember the story I told at the beginning with the Black man sitting on the bench? What did that white man say to him? Are you going to move Or am I going to have to call the police? I don't know. But Rosa Parks, her revolutionary choice made a revolutionary change, and it led to nationwide desegregation of the buses. So was she not the wind? Look at Angela Davis. She made a revolutionary choice. She dared to take on the United States government and proclaim her innocence when the government was trying to persecute her on account of her political opinion and her race. She faced the death penalty, y'all. I don't know if you are aware, but she was facing the death penalty. Yet, she was able to persuade an all-white jury in 1972 that she was not guilty. I mean, in her book, The Meaning of Freedom and Other Difficult Dialogues, which is a collection of her speeches over the years in discussing a former Black Panther and journalist, Mumia Abu-Jamal, who was convicted of murdering a police officer and is currently serving a life sentence in prison, Angela Davis said of the United States and freedom, quote, "The most important way to claim this country as our own is to claim it through struggle, to improve it, to use it as an arena where we strive to create a better world." Is that not revolutionary change? And if you think that the revolution in Tunisia was a fearsome sight, oh, no. If you think the revolution in Egypt was a fearsome sight, oh, no. If you think the revolution in Hong Kong was a fearsome sight, oh, no. If you think that the revolution in the Ukraine was a fearsome sight, oh, no, then my friends, you better watch out, because hell hath no fury like an American revolution. And mice shall become men, and men mice. What is over shall be under, and under over. Do you know this poem, actually, To a Mouse by Robert Burns? I was obsessed with this poem. I was reading it, and every analysis that I read of it said that the man had such empathy for the mouse, and that the man was so sorry that he accidentally destroyed the mouse's home. And I said, "What you talking about, Willis?" That's not what I see when I read that poem. I'm going to have to beg to differ here. Reasonable people can disagree, but when you read the poem, you have to first consider that the poem begins with an imbalance of power between members of two different races, a man and a mouse, right? And if you read the poem and you identify with the man, then yes, you probably see empathy and remorse. But if you read the poem and you identify with the mouse, and you hear a man say, someone of a different race who has more power than you hear that man say, "I'm sorry that life made me better than you. I mean, is it my fault that I am more powerful than you? If we lived in a different world, you and I, we would be friends. But now you hate me because I'm better than you? How is that fair, mouse? You and I are the same." I'm sorry, what? To me, this is like the literary equivalent of all lives matter. Like, no, friend, we're not talking about you in this moment. In this moment, we're talking about the mouse and how you destroyed the mouse's home. If and when that mouse comes and destroys your house, then you can say, "What about me?" But that is not happening currently. Currently, you, the man, are destroying the mouse. So let's just talk about the mouse, okay? And continues to say, "Look, Mouse, I know that you steal food from me, but I don't care. I have so much food, I don't even notice when you take the little crumbs. And your house that I destroyed, oh look, there it goes, your house, blowing away in the wind. No house, and it's going to be cold tonight. Oh, but look on the bright side, Mouse. Life sucks for you, and life sucks for me too. I'm sorry. How is that an apology? Where is the remorse here? How is that empathy? No, that's not empathy at all. That man could have done several things if he was truly remorseful, right? He could have built the mouse another house. He could have invited the mouse into his own home and let the mouse warm himself by the fire. He could have fed the mouse and offered the mouse payment for loss of his house. There were several things that the man could have done if he was actually remorseful. There were many avenues that he could have taken, various actions that he could have done if he was truly remorseful. Is that not right? But I'm sorry, if it is genuine, should be accompanied by actions, by restitution, by doing something to right the situation for the person that has been wronged. So if we are truly sorry about racial segregation and racial inequality in both the wizarding world and the real world, then what actions, what restitution, what reparations? Yeah, I said it. What reparations are going to accompany that apology in order to right the situation? Here's the thing though, the US government could choose to give $1 million to 500 million Black Americans who have been negatively impacted due to the racial inequalities that have existed since the country was founded. It could choose to put in action behind the words of apology. It could invite us into their house and let us warm ourselves by the fire and say to us, how can we right this situation for you, dear mouse? The US government could do that. But instead, it chooses to spend $500 million every year to house 39 people at Guantanamo Bay. Let us hope that J.K. Rowling and the people who are in charge of the wizarding world are willing to do more than just apologize. So what are the changes that I would like to see? First of all, we need to integrate Hogwarts and all of the schools that are connected with the wizarding world, including the one in the United States, with all haste. Magical education must be made available to all children on equal terms, regardless of their race. Separate but equal is not a doctrine that we support any longer. Second, I would like to see them unlock the restricted section of the library and introduce education into their theme parks. They should place some placards at the entrance of these monuments, educating people on their Jim Crow roots, educate people on Plessy versus Ferguson and the separate but equal doctrine, educate people on Brown versus the Board of Education. There is a captive audience for Harry Potter and for Hogwarts, and we can use this story to teach people about the issues that we would otherwise never discuss, because it is a painful part of our history that we would rather not look at. But this story, these theme parks, these monuments are now forcing us to confront this history. So I would like to see them introduce some education at these theme parks. Third, allow Black Harry Potter to speak and tell his story. This story the Harry Potter remix that I wrote is not intended to take the place of the original Harry Potter. There are still 7 books and 8 movies dedicated to white Harry Potter. The fact of the matter is, white Harry Potter never tried to integrate his world. He never tried to integrate the races because he benefited from racial segregation. The only person who does not benefit from racial segregation are the Black Harry Potters of the world. If white Harry Potter is a wizard, then all of a sudden everyone loves wizards. But if Black Harry Potter is a wizard, suddenly the government is like, we need to do something about that wizard problem. Lastly, I'm going to go ahead and say reparations. White people have benefited from racism for centuries. And here we have another example of how many of white people have continued to benefit from racism by cloaking Jim Crow in fantasy and making monuments that they call theme parks that continue to condition us to be instinctually blind to the faces. People who are making money off of the idea of separate but equal. And before we start trying to shame and shun J.K. Rowling, this is not her fault. She didn't make all that money by herself. She was not the only person benefiting from this. This is our history in the United States. If there had never been an audience for these theme parks, then they would have never built them here. So what does that say about us? That we allowed this to happen. We allowed them to build these theme parks celebrating separate but equal, even though we know that this was our history. Are we not also to blame?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
My opinion is this: we have an opportunity right now to create something new. If we use our wands, our magic, or our voices to reveal that which has up to now been covered by the cloak of invisibility, if we choose to see that which connects us instead of defending our blind spots, the legacy that we leave behind would be a powerful message, a message that it is okay to change. It is okay. Not just okay, but necessary. It is welcomed. It is life. Change can be celebrated, not shamed, like the changing color of the leaves, like the changing of our bodies as we age. Change is an inescapable part of life. It feels scary to us, though. It feels like a death. But there are many possibilities that will open at the close. The story can still end with all is well and hope for a new beginning, even with change. But we will build this world, this new world, with love at its foundation rather than fear. If we choose to reconnect with our feminine power in all of her many faces, Black Mary, my girl, the trees, the wind, Mother Nature herself, if we choose to leave behind the fear of one another, we will find all of the happiness and joy that we seek. If we commit to choosing love and we are passionate about finding the truth in ourselves, in our blind spots, we can achieve that long desired harmony with all of our neighbors. Bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh, all of my neighbors. But it will take the cooperation of everyone to defend peace and speak truth to power. So as we see more people continuing to die as a result of the COVID pandemic, I am just reminded of the very beginning of the pandemic in March of 2020. We hear often a lot of people talk about what the pandemic was like for married people or people who lived with a partner or even children. It was very rare. at least for me, to hear people talk about what the pandemic was like for single people. So during the pandemic, I lived by myself. I was not dating anyone at that time. And so with all of the social distancing and the COVID protocols, I went almost 1 year without any physical touch from another person. 1 year. So we're talking about connection with other people. Physical touch is an important part of the way that we connect. Touch reassures us that we are not alone, that we are wanted, and that we are accepted by other people. It is comforting to us, and it keeps us emotionally balanced. Of course, we are talking about touch among trusted persons, right? With our consent. We're talking about touch with consent. And so I will link a video, I think it's DW video on touch that I was watching that I found to be very informative. I'll put it in the description box. But they were talking about touch, or the lack thereof, and how it impacts our mental and our physical health. So in this documentary, they talked about how we are better able to convey compassion and love through touch. So I started to wonder what impact a year without any physical touch may have on my own mental and physical health. I know that there were many. For example, I drank way more than I used to, and I went through several bouts of depression. So then I started to think about the people who are denied human contact and touch as punishment. Those people who are kept in solitary confinement. Do we have a blind spot when it comes to these people? Do we only see a vase, the unwanted behavior, or the accusation of a crime? Or can we see their faces? Can we see the impact that a lack of human contact and touch would have on their mental health? Remember Sandra Bland? Remember when she was pulled over for failing to signal and was arrested for assaulting a police officer when she refused to put out her cigarette in her own car? Remember that? And why resources were expended unnecessarily to put a person in jail for a non-violent offense like failing to use a turn signal? We will have to discuss that one another day. I mean, this video is already longer than I anticipated. We'll leave that question for another day. But Sandra Bland later allegedly committed suicide by hanging herself. According to the Department of Justice Bureau of Statistics, during 2015 to 2019, about 12% of deaths by suicide in local jails occurred within the first 24 hours of incarceration. What is behind these suicide rates in prison? Could these suicides be linked to the dehumanization that occurs the moment that a person is arrested and then they are stripped of their clothing and their names and then given a number and a uniform? I mean, what does that sound like? Now, I know I can hear you. I can hear you all the way over here. Danzy, are you trying to teach me? Because for a second, I felt like you were trying to teach me, right? Can you get back to Harry Potter? I just want to know, what does this have to do with Harry Potter? Well, my friends, you have to read the story to find out. It will all make sense when you read the story. Link in the description box. Holy vulva, Batman. I'm working here, people. I'm working. Am I selling you on the idea? I'm selling you on this idea of change, not just in the wizarding world, but in our real world. But we have to start with the wizarding world and let it trickle down. But I don't think I could end the video without talking about dragons. Yes, dragons. We need to talk about the dragons. Where are they? What would become of them, do you think, in an integrated world? Is Hagrid, the keeper of keys and grounds, looking after the dragons? Would we eat the dragons? Would we find a way to factory farm the dragons? Turn them into weapons, perhaps? I'm telling you, I don't know. I don't know where it comes from. I just know that I ponder the big questions. I ponder, what would we do with the dragons? Would we factory farm the dragons? We would for sure find a way to factory farm the dragons. I have no doubt about this. The truth is, though, my friends, that both wizards and muggles will have to cooperate with each other. They will have to unify their own unique forms of magic if they hope to make revolutionary change. Releasing our outdated beliefs, diligently searching for what we are not seeing, what is concealed in our blind spots, and moving slowly and thoughtfully towards a new possibility, one that involves harmony amongst all people. That is a wise choice, I think. A choice that is based in love and compassion with peace at its foundation, not fear. We must be determined to let go of scapegoating other people who are different from us. Drop all of our baggage, drop all of the baggage that we have accumulated in our life as a result of being taught to be afraid of other people. We've been taught to be afraid of other people, and so we're just carrying around other people's fear. Our fear is illusory, and it is keeping us stuck, preventing us from connecting with other people in the world. Let's choose love, people. Let's choose love. Let's choose revolutionary change. Let's choose a new beginning. Let's move away from the past and begin to create a new world full of empathy and compassion for one another. I'm sure it can happen. Just read the story and tell me. And tell me if you think I'm crazy and it didn't happen for you. You can say, all right, she's crazy. I read it and she's crazy. But when I first read Harry Potter, I was finishing my freshman year in college and beginning my sophomore year, but I was taking classes over the summer. So I took a course called Children's Literature, and it was the first time I had ever read Harry Potter. We read the first book, The Philosopher's Stone. I didn't read Harry Potter before that because, to me, Harry Potter was a children's book, and I considered myself to be an adult. I was, 19. So I did not bother with Harry Potter until it was required reading in my course. I was an English major. I don't know if I said that already. But I wrote a paper back then on some mediocre thing about good and evil and blah, 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 blah. And I wasn't satisfied with it, but I just turned it in anyway, and I got a mediocre grade. And I think about this paper often, and I'm just like, I can do so much better. I always wished that I could do it over. So here it is. This is my obscenely long and well over the word count redo, my essay on blind spotting and scapegoating in Harry Potter. I mean, honestly, I feel like I should have a PhD in wizard worldology. If that's not a thing, it should really be a thing, because I for sure have a PhD in wizard worldology, okay? Thank you for watching my first YouTube video. If you are so inclined to read the story, People of the Wind, a Harry Potter story, I will link it below. I would love to hear your respectful comments. Until next time, peace.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. 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 Oh. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I think, personally, this is just my opinion, that Angela Davis would be a perfect choice for revolutionary change in 2024. Who better to lead revolutionary change than a real revolutionary? Okay? Yes.